Pre-meds, we got more Anki flashcards to do, and I really don't want to do more today because I am so tired. But you know what? The people who do what they don't want to do are the people who get far in life. It's a big tip for y'all. Pre-meds. Alright, here we go. I don't know what you want to do. I guess main goal today is I'm gonna try and get through everything, all these reviews by the end of these 2 hours. Yeah. Alright, here we go. I'll pick up where I left off. Chapter 9. Solubility refers to electrostatic interactions between solute and solvent overpower the interaction between solute and solute. Maximum amount of substance that can be dissolved. Yeah. 7 general. I still need to make sure I need to know this. Freezing point directions delta TB equals IKF over M. M is molality. Increasing solute concentration will decrease freezing point. Molar solubility is a concentration of ions in a saturated solution. Yeah. Alright, here we go. Next up, let's finish the chapter 8 bio. What are lymph nodes used for? Lymph nodes are used for a site to mount an immune response, and also beta or B cells are activated here as well. Monocytes are agranulocytes, and they become macrophages in tissues and they're phagocytic cells in the bloodstream. Antigen binds to a B cell. It'll cause B cell to differentiate into plasma cells and memory B cells, and the plasma cells become macrophages, or it becomes antibodies. Antigens binding to the surface of mast cell causes degranulations, which causes the release of histamine, which causes inflammation and inflammation. Naive B cells hang out in the lymph nodes. So T cells, positive selection or T cells is allowing only T cells that are reactive to foreign antigens to mature or become activated. And negative selection T cells refers to the destroying of T cells that are self-reactive to self-antigens. Cytotoxic T cells are T cells that directly kill infected cells by injecting toxin into the cell to kill them, and they respond to MHC class 2 molecules, so exogenous pathogens. Damn it, MHC 1. Okay. What type of so lysozymes can be, or defensive enzymes found in our skin. Intracellular pathogens, so MHC class 1 are cytotoxic T cells. Yeah. How does the body prevent autoimmune reactions? So T cells are educated in the thymus, quote unquote, meaning that T cells that are self-reactive and B cells also that are self-reactive to self-antigens are destroyed. Humoral immunity refers to the use of beta cells, so antibodies. Hormone thymosin is a hormone used in thymic cells in the thymus, which causes something with T cells, the maturation of T cells. Clonal selection refers to allowing only B cells that bind to the antigen with highest affinity to survive, while B antigens that don't bind to the antigen won't survive. Beta cells govern humoral, and T cells govern cell-mediated. They produce a non-specific bacterial enzyme known as lysozyme, which is secreted in our saliva and tears. Innate immunity is non-specific immunity. At the thoracic duct in the posterior chest. Helper T cells, suppressor T cells, or helper cytotoxic T cells helper T cells, suppressor T cells. Helper T cells respond to, now I know, MHC class 2 molecules. Helper T cells secrete lymphokines that also recruit additional immune cells to the area. Lymphatic system is a one-way circulatory system with blood, one-way vessel circulatory system with lymph nodes. Isotype switching refers to the switching of or production of specific isoforms of antibodies like IgA, IgB, all those, depending on the cytokine that's received. Cytotoxics respond to MHC class 1 intracellular pathogens, and these T cells will kill infected cells by injecting a toxin which induces apoptosis. Let's do chapter. Okay, so I can't do 1. So reducing order. I can't do 15 because it's not that I'm done with it. I just did chapter 6 yesterday. I want to touch it. I also did chapter. I can do chapter 7 later. Let's go through chapter 10. Amphoteric means that it can react as an acid or base. Water is an amphoteric molecule. How does water behave when it reacts with an acid? Water will behave as a base. Weak acids and bases have weak conjugates. Ka times Kb equals 1 times 10 to the negative 14 equals Kw. What is the equivalence point? The equivalence point is a point in which the titration is over, so the end point is reached. Not the end point, yeah. What is the reaction of a weak monoprotic base with water? So H or BOH dissociates to B plus OH minus. What is the name and structure of common oxyacids? Oxyacids, we have sulfate, SO4 3 minus. No, wait, no. One sec. Common oxyacids are carbonic acid, CO3 2 minus, sulfuric acid or sulfate, SO4 2 minus, phosphate, PO4 3 minus, borate, BO3 3 minus, and chromate, CrO4 3 minus. Damn it. CrO4 2 minus. SO4 2 minus, PO3 4 minus, PO4 3 minus, BO3 3 minus. pH to POH. pH plus POH equals 14. How does water behave when it reacts as a base, as an acid? Most general is Arrhenius and Bronsted-Lowry, then Lewis. A reaction is complete when the equivalence point is reached. The equivalent point is reached when reaction changes color by using an indicator, and when there's equivalent amount of acid and base in the solution. What's important? Polyprotic acid dissociates more than 1 time, so 1 mole of polyprotic acid will dissociate into more than 1 mole of hydrogen. What does it have the appearance? So strong base, strong acid curve, strong base texture with strong NaOH added. So it starts at 2, and then the equivalence point is at pH equals 7, NaOH added, and pH on the y-axis. And starts at pH equals 0, yeah. So we have chlorite or hypochlorite, which is ClO minus. Chlorite, ClO2 minus. Chlorate, ClO3 minus. And perchlorate, ClO4 minus. Okay. Px is negative log of x. Conjugate base is just the The product when an acid loses its proton. Titration works by having a titrant, and a titrand. You dispense a titrant into the titrand, and you know the volume you added, and you know the concentration. For a titrand, you only know the volume, but you don't necessarily know the concentration. A titration is dispensing of a titrant into a titrand, specifically like an acid in a titrand and base in a titrant. And you basically do it till you reach the equivalence point, which is a color change. A weak acid titrate with a strong base, so weak acids are at pH equals 2, and the equivalence point is usually above pH 7 because you're using a strong base. Lewis bases are they donate electrons. Kw is the auto ionization constant of water 1 times 10 to the negative 14 at 25 degrees Celsius. This part Kw equals H3O plus OH minus. When acid loses a proton, the proton reacts with water to form hydronium, but we think of it as just floating around freely. Polyvalent has multiple equivalence points if they are polyprotic, for example. N1V1 equals N2V2. N is normality and volume. As pH goes up, acid rain goes down. Strong acid, high Ka, dissociate completely. Common oxyacid, CO3 minus carbonate. SO4 minus sulfate. PO4 minus phosphate. CrO4 minus chromate. BO3 minus borate. Kw is Kw equals hydronium concentration times OH minus concentration equals 1 times 10 to the negative 14 at 25 degrees Celsius. Cool. And let's jump to... I'll do heart later. Let's do chapter 6. Did I do chapter 6 yesterday? Yeah, I did. Let's see. I think I did this yesterday. So let's not touch that because I just did those yesterday. If that's the case, let's jump to some organic chem. Gas chromatography. Basically you have the mobile phase, which is a gas molecule, and the stationary phase is a long polymer tube. Stationary phases are always polar, and gas molecules are nonpolar, and gas molecules will elute through the gas chromatography, and you can record its retention time. Gravity filtration is using or pouring your liquid over a small funnel with like a cotton ball and use gravity to filtrate out. The filtrate. This is good if you're wanting to get pure filtrate and you don't really care about the residue. That's cotton filtration, but yeah. Oh yeah. We'll consider pure filtrate. What is reverse phase chromatography? So reverse phase chromatography is basically the same thing as any other chromatography, TLC and paper. The only difference is that the stationary phase is now nonpolar and the mobile phase is nonpolar. Or the stationary phase is nonpolar, mobile phase is polar. Fractional distillation is where you have a fractional column to increase surface area for vapor pressure to condense. So this allows you to separate or distill two liquids that have a boiling point below 150 degrees Celsius but only a difference below 25 degrees Celsius. So you're able to distill out liquids that are pretty close to each other in boiling point. Okay. Good. Top layer is always organic, or not always, but mostly organic. And the bottom layer is aqueous. You have affinity chromatography, size occlusion chromatography, ion exchange chromatography. Where is solubility? Recrystallization, filtration, and recrystallization, filtration. I don't know, there's another one. I can't think of it. Recrystallization, filtration. Oh, it's like the one where you mix it together. What's that called? Oh, I don't remember it. Extraction. When do we use? When two liquids are below 150 degrees and they have a difference below 25 degrees Celsius of boiling point. Absorbent is the stationary phase. Retardation factor, RF, is equal to the distance, the distance that the spot traveled up a TLC plate, and the denominator is the solvent front. And it's pretty constant for every molecule on a specific plate. So you can use it to identify stuff. Do it over and over again for separatory funnel separations. Basically, any subliminal solids, so solids that condense to gas, or solids that go into gas phase very easily, and low boiling point liquids. Recrystallization is where you first you put the solid or the liquid into, or the solid into a solution where it's about to dissolve. Then you heat up the solution, and then you recrystallize the solid, and it does so in a way that it doesn't catch any impurities. I don't really know, actually. Put product in small amount of solvent so it's close to the mouth. We heat the solvent, which increases the solubility to make the product dissolve. We slowly cool the flash, which causes the product to crystallize with no impurities. So the point I missed was that you basically heat it up so it dissolves to increase solubility. Boiling point. A simple distillation is just where you have a tube here, column, and you have this condenser rod, and then you have the collecting flask. And basically, you heat up both solutions, and you're able to, one will go to the top and condense into a liquid, the other one just keeps boiling. You're able to separate liquids that have greater than 25 degrees Celsius at boiling point, but below 150 degrees Celsius. Okay. What property is chromatography based on its affinity towards the stationary and polar phase? So extraction for nonpolar and polar compounds in solution, you basically take two immiscible solvents that are polar and nonpolar, then you drop your compound into solution, and you mix it up. And basically the polar compounds will go into the polar phase, and then the nonpolar compound will go into the nonpolar phase. And when you mix up, you get two things. You get an organic layer, which contains your non-polar stuff, and that's at the top, and you get the aqueous layer, which contains your polar compounds, and that's at the bottom. And you can separate them out using a separatory funnel. Partition coefficient. It's the concentration of concentration in these in the stationary phase over concentration in the mobile phase. So if you have lots of concentration in the mobile phase, you have a low partition coefficient. Okay. Mass spectrometer. You basically deflect a compound through beta electric fields, and the heavier the molecule or compound, the less it gets deflected, and the lighter the molecule, the more it gets deflected. And you're able to identify a compound based on that by its mass. Above 25 degrees Celsius, different boiling points. Below 150 degrees Celsius. Superheating is where you're heating, you have a liquid and you heat it past its boiling point, but it's bubbling. This is because the gas molecules can overcome the atmospheric pressure, so what you can do is add boiling chips to it to help get it to boil. Distillation, separating two goods based on their boiling point into a distillate. A gas chromatography mass spectrophometer is basically where you have a gas chromatographer, so you basically separate out gas molecules and you fire them to a mass spectrophotometer to identify the gas molecules instantly. Vacuum filtration is using a vacuum hooked up to this burette flask. Basically, this is if you use vacuum filtration if you're trying to get a pure residue. We use vacuum distillation where we're separating liquids above 150 degrees Celsius, and it does this by lowering the atmospheric pressure to lower the boiling points of the liquid. Vacuum distillation, again, we're using a vacuum to distill the liquid. You're sucking out air pressure to lower the boiling point, and it's good if you're separating liquids that have above 150 degrees Celsius in temperature. What are the solubilities? So extraction, filtration, and recrystallization. Recrystallization is where you have a product, you put it into a solvent where it's almost soluble, and you heat up the the solution to increase solubility of the product, so it starts to dissolve, and then you slowly cool the flask to allow recrystallization to occur, and basically the solid is able to recrystallize without catching any of the impurities. Great. Let's see here. Did I finish this yet? Find out. How do you protect a carbonyl? You can use OMS, or you can use TMS to protect the carbon. Oh no, to protect the carbonyl. Protect the carbonyl. You can react it with a diol. So forming a diol forms it into an acetal or ketal, which acts as a protecting group. And then you're able to react it with aqueous acid to convert it back to a carbonyl. Okay. Quinones are basically the products of oxidation of phenols. So you use phenol, you oxidize it into a quinone, basically has a ketone instead. Hydroxyquinones are just quinones with hydroxy groups on them. A phenol is a more aromatic ring with a hydroxyl group, and it's more acidic. The hydrogen is more acidic because the conjugate base is stabilized by resonance around the ring. Jones oxidation is a very strong oxidation of any alcohol into a carboxylic acid using H2SO4. What was it? CrO3, H2SO4, and acetone. Ubiquinone's an important molecule for ETC, especially complex 1, 2, and 3. Ubiquinone is the oxidized form, and ubiquinol is the reduced form. Mesylates, you can form them using something called, well, you react with an alcohol to form it. You turn it into a leaving group. The product is an alcohol with the O and MS added, so OMS. And to form it, you use, I think it's like SO, CH3, CH3, Cl. Cool. Nitrochloromidine. Yeah. Tosylate is another protecting for alcohol. To form a tosylate, you react it with TSCl, and it'll react with an alcohol to form OTS as a leaving group. Yeah, TSL or OTS. Cool. Let's see here. I did 6, 7. I can do chapter 2. I just did chapter 2 yesterday, though, so let's jump to chapter 1, physics. The purpose of the right-hand rule. Let me do this. The purpose of the right-hand rule is to figure out the vector product from the dot product. Right, dot product? No, cross product. How does one use the right-hand rule? It's pretty self-explanatory, yeah. Average acceleration over time, delta V over delta T. For the magnitude of gravitational force, G equals, or Fg equals G m1 m2 over r squared. Uniform acceleration, kinematics equation, A equals V2 or V final minus V initial over 2 times delta T, or times T. Let's say A and X. No, that's a range, because the more surface area you have, the more static friction you get. So 0 Fs greater than USN. And again, higher surface area means more frictional forces. A vector, magnitude and direction. Kinetic friction, UK equals FK over, or FK equals UK times N. Time. Acceleration equals delta V over delta T. For parallel, use mg sine theta. Cross product, A times B equals A B sine theta. Distance is distance traveled. Mass and weight equals mg. Static friction, US, it's a range, so 0 in between Fs and between USN. Newton's second law, EF equals ma. Air resistance is frictional force coming from air. It's how you get terminal velocity, because air resistance makes it so you can eventually reach a point where acceleration equals 0. What are two differences between static friction and kinetic friction? Static friction is much stronger than kinetic friction, and static friction takes on value kinetic friction. It's one value. Fc equals mv squared over r. Identify both sides of the torque and all forces acting on it. To create a scalar, you use the dot product. Okay, this one's kind of always hard. So you have, the first one is, well, V equals V naught plus AT. Right? Yeah, the VAT equation. Then you have V squared equals V naught squared plus 2A delta X. You have x squared equals v naught squared, or v naught t plus 1/2 at squared. And you have x equals v bar t. V equals v naught plus at. V squared equals v naught, or x equals v naught t. I did x squared. X equals v naught t plus 1/2 at squared. V squared equals v naught squared plus 2a delta x. Oh, okay, almost got it. Normal force is a force exerted from that's perpendicular to the object resting on the surface. When multiplying vectors, what type of product should be used? Use the cross product to create a new vector. Instantaneous are equivalent. Again, x equals, or v equals v naught plus at. X equals v naught t plus 1/2 at squared. V squared equals v naught squared plus 2a delta x. X equals v bar t. V squared equals v naught squared plus 2a delta x. X equals v naught t plus 1/2 at squared. V equals v naught plus at. Let's jump to chapter 2. How does one calculate power in terms where power equals work over T, which is delta E over T? What is the work energy theorem? The work energy theorem says that work net equals delta KE. Okay. Efficiency equals efficiency. Is it work out over work in? Which is load times load distance, effort times effort distance. Non-conservative forces are forces that don't dissipate energy into the surrounding, like gravitational force and electrostatics. What? Oh, yeah. Dissipate energy form heat, friction, air resistance. So, what should be the change in total mechanical energy of an object when dealing? So, if you're dealing with conservative forces, W equals conservative forces. So delta E equals 0. So, yeah, delta E equals 0. Hard. What is a mechanical advantage? Mechanical advantage is force out over force in. So mechanical deals with forces. Energy is the capacity to do work. Amount of work done on an object. Work equals force times d cosine theta. Force on the object since the object moved, and the angle between force and d. So work equals P delta V. Work equals FD cosine theta. And work net equals delta KE or if you're considering non-conservative forces, so work net equals delta E, which equals delta KE plus delta U. Power in terms of force, power equals force times velocity cosine theta. Work equals transfer mechanical energy from one object to another. Efficiency equals work out, work in, load times load distance, effort times effort distance. Non-conservative forces are forces that dissipate energy into the surrounding in the form of light, heat, and sound, such as friction and air resistance. Cool. Let's see here. Yeah, so for the most part, I pretty much finished all that I've done. I still got to do psychology too. Yeah, because I don't want to touch these guys. Let's see here. Yeah, chapter 6 is a pain in the ass to deal with. Chapter 7 is also a pain in the ass to deal with. Let's just do it. Oh, but do I want to do that or do I want to do something else? Because organic I just did yesterday. We did almost 500. Let's just do this. Parvocellular pathway is the pathway that's used to detect temporal spatial resolution, such as motion, and my primary component is cones. The milligrams. Oh, I don't want to do 100 today. Not in the mood to do 100. Let's do only one. Parallel processing color form motion at the same time. The state beads will vibrate at the same frequency as the stimulus and move the little window back and forth. Opiates and opioids mimic endorphin. They are vasodilators and they depress and is used to reduce anxiety. Hit greater than miss, strong signal. Miss greater than hit, weak signal. Cones detect color and high levels of detail. Gestalt's Pragnaz law states that we view like objects in the simplest way form. For example, the Olympic string, we view them as 5 perfect circles. Constancy is things that we perceive to be different than what appears on our retina. Size constancy, color constancy, shape constancy. Things are far away, eyes are relaxed. Things close to his eyes are contracted. Basilar tuning is the idea that high frequency sound waves hit the hair cells on the outer region of the cochlea, while low frequency sounds hit the hair cells in the back of the cochlea. Organ of Corti contains the basilar membrane, tectorial membrane, and some hair cells. When the rhodopsin trace in the shape, transducin breaks out from rhodopsin alpha subunits bind to this protein called PDE. 2 strategies is the liberal strategy, which is to say yes on everything, even if it raises false alarms. Conservative strategy is to say no unless you're 100% sure signal is present. Human ear goes from the pinna, which is the outer ear, to the auditory canal, to the tympanic membrane, which is the eardrum. So like attention is dividing your attention between dividing your attention on one task between 2 different tasks, like watching TV or studying. Tobacco addicts can give them a patch that delivers nicotine. Transdermal patch delivers nicotine slow amounts to dampen high and reduce cravings. Or you can give them, what was it called? It's not methadone, but it's another drug that acts on acetylcholine receptors, so it dampens the high to reduce craving. Yeah. Contextual effects, basically we perceive objects to be different than the way we are based on what we're presented with. For example, the picture is going to come up as read, where half of it's covered, and we perceive that word to be read. More hot light hits the cone at the fovea than at the periphery, mainly because the fovea contains no axons in the way, while at the periphery there's lots of axons in the way, so it blocks the ability of light to transfer all of its energy. Rhodopsin. So rhodopsin is a protein located in rods, and when light hits the rod, some of it will hit rhodopsin, which causes retinol, a molecule inside rhodopsin, to change shape from bent to straight. At the somatosensory cortex in the parietal lobe, retinol changes conformation, rhodopsin will change shape, and the phototransduction cascade can begin. Vestibular system is the inner ear. It's used for spatial orienting and balance. Dissociation theory of hypothesis states that hypnosis is a specific form of divided attention, special case of divided attention. Social influence theory states that hypnosis is basically people being told or being caught up in the role, kind of like actors being caught up in the role. They do what they're told to do. Kind of like if a government tells you you're a lizard, you believe you're a lizard. Substance use disorder talks about the physiological effects of taking a drug, or psychological. Nope, physiological. Oh, it occurs when the use The drug causes serious degree. What are the three types of cones? Red, green, blue. Subliminal stimuli with that doesn't quite reach the absolute threshold. This notable difference is the minimum amount of stimulus required to notice a difference in sensation. When CGMP is bound to NA plus channels, they keep the NA plus channels open, allowing rods to be turned on. In PDE, it converts CGMP to GMP, so no CGMP keeps the NA plus channel closed, turning off the rods. You look at their high usage, withdrawal periods, and high recovery time. Faster routes of entry increase addictive potential. Cones are all centered at the fovea, which is in the retina. Where is the olfactory epithelium located? In the vomeronasal passage of animals, or in the nasal passage of animals. Cochlea, the primary auditory cortex, it falls under the temporal lobe. Empty card again, probably the one with awake. Yeah, alertness is an awake state. Daydreaming is drowsy or self-induced, awake but relaxed state. Tardiness is drowsiness, self-induced. Sleep is not awake at all. Chunking in terms of memories, grouping memories together is a form of memorization technique. For example, you might group apples, bananas, and grapes into fruits. The Milgram study was a study that was done on patients where he basically told one Confederate participant to play the learner role while the actual participant played a teacher role. And basically he told the teacher, the participant, to give questions to the Confederate learner. And if they get it wrong, the participant will give an electric shock to the Confederate learner. And the Confederate learner would pretend that he was getting shocked and that he was in big pain. And what he noticed was that a lot of the participants, even though it was against their moral standard, they basically still did a horrible act and gave an electric shock to people. Flashbulb memory are highly vivid and emotional memories that can be positive or negative and susceptible to reconstruction. Pragmatics refers to how much a language depends on pre-existing knowledge. Sound wave and hair cells. Depressants. They lower your CNS, and the three types are benzodiazepines, barbiturates, and alcohol. Amplification is how light energy hits the eye and it gets amplified by the time it hits the brain. Law of common fate says that we tend to group objects that are going in the same direction together, like blue angels. Yep. Weber's laws delta I, which is the threshold difference, over I, which is the minimum amount of sensation required to detect a sensation, equals K. K. Alzheimer's disease. Neurons dying off over time, so the cerebral cortex shrinks in size, and characterized by amyloid plaques in the brain. Sometimes we remember a schema. What's a schema? It's a mental model, mental blueprint of the world. Basically, yeah, how you view the world. Two main categories of long-term memory. We've got explicit memory and implicit memory. Explicit declarative, implicit non-declarative. Brain relies on the cochlea to differentiate between two different sound frequencies, but also called tonotopical mapping. Free recall is recalling without any cues, hard to retrieve. Stress can affect women's reproductive systems by decreasing amounts of FSH and LH, while in men it decreases the level of testosterone and increases the likelihood of erectile dysfunction. Stress can increase blood pressure, so it causes hypertension and cardiovascular disease, coronary heart disease. Yeah, causes coronary heart disease. Salty since bind directly to salt receptors because they're ion channels, or ion receptors. Solid tastings bind to soundness receptors by binding to it, which makes it reactive to protons. And when protons bind to soundness receptors, it closes the potassium channels. Procedural memory is part of implicit memory. Spotlight model of attention is the idea that we're primed to some things. For example, we're primed to our name and we're aware of some things unconsciously. Availability heuristic. So availability heuristic is a way of thinking where you think of examples that come to mind to make a decision. For example, in the news, you hear a lot about lots of shark attacks, and your friend asks you to go to the beach. You might not want to go to the beach because you're scared of sharks. Partial report techniques where you show them 3x3 matrix of numbers and ask them to say one row of numbers, and they're probably able to do it mainly because the image hasn't left their sensual memory. Macula is part of the retina and contains mostly cones and some rods. Because Chomsky argues that adults don't pick up language as quick because they don't have the LAD. The LAD is only active from age 0 to 9. Happiness, sadness, fear, anger, disgust, surprise. Endogenous cues is driven by bottom-up processing. Or no, top-down processing. Right? Top-down processing. This is where you're using your innate knowledge to understand something. Like a mouse, for example. Of course, turn this on the cue, intention to follow it. Yeah. A bit hard. Because the prefrontal cortex gets deactivated during REM sleep, and the prefrontal cortex is also responsible for logic. Implicit memory is a part of long-term memory. It's non-declarative, and you're kind of the memories you form unconsciously, so like habits, etc. Hans general adaptation syndrome. There are the 3 stages of stress, which is the alert phase, exhaust phase, and the resistance phase. Alert phase, resistance phase, exhaustion phase. The hypothalamus. Hypothalamus is responsible for hypothalamus. Hippocampus is for memory. Hypothalamus is required. So it controls the autonomic nervous system and the endocrine system, and hunger, sleep, thirst, sex. It regulates all those. During meditation, you have alpha waves. During meditation, you have theta waves. Johnson and Heiss said the attenuator may be able to be varied from individual and based on task to task, depending on how much a task necessitates the need for an attenuator. Spearman theory tells us that we have one general intelligence, which is stemmed from the evidence that children who do well in math also do well in reading and writing. Strong neural links equals reduced processing time. What's a physiological component of cognitive, behavioral, and emotional experience? Physiological response, body temperature might raise up. Cognitive response, some people, how you view the experience of some people, like surprise parties, some people don't. And behavioral, you might give up body language, and you might have facial expression. If a patient has severed corpus callosum, so separate from the left, if you see something on your left side, it goes to your right side of your brain, so you're able to pick it up, but you can't use your left side of the brain, so you're not able to name it because you don't have language. 9 to 12 years blabbling, 12 to 18 months 1 word, 8 to 20 months explosion of word, 2 to 3 years 3 word sentence, 5 years full language mastery. Deaf form motion constancy. Deaf form motion constancy. 12 plus years, the stable operational stage. And this is where um, children are able to think about their consequences of actions, more reasoning, and are able to understand abstract concepts. Stable, it's formal, not stable. Substance use disorders are just disorders from taking a drug that actually come from the substance use itself. So like you're addicted to using a specific substance. Somatosensory homunculus is a map of different parts of the brain and different parts of your body that connects you to different parts of the brain. So stages: Spearman, Thurston, Gardner, Sternberg. So to retrieve information, priming, context, state dependence. Lexical access is pulling a knowledge and connecting it with a word, a new word. Law of past experiences state that we perceive stimuli based on how our past experiences deal with those stimuli. So if you see red light from the color red, you might think of stop. Where are all the fovea and the retina? Long-term potentials is the idea that brains only strengthen signals between neurons. They don't grow more neurons. When you're learning something, supports a brain plasticity hypotheses. Schemas. Linguistic determinism says that language determines thoughts. There's weak linguistic determinism, which is relativism, and the strong linguistic determinism is the Sapir-Whorf hypotheses. And one sleep stage is characterized by theta waves. And theta waves, hypnic jerks, so random muscle twitches, and hypnagogic hallucinations, seeing things that aren't there. When a molecule comes to drills, it binds to GPCR receptors in the basal apical cells, and it causes G protein to dissociate, which causes an influx of chloride ions to send action potential down the axon to the glomerulus, which is past the cribriform plate in the olfactory bulb. And the glomerulus have mutual touch cells that send signals to the amygdala of the brain. Language in the left hemisphere. Milgram's study, again, was a study where he conducted with Confederate learners and participant teachers. Participant teachers asked the Confederate learners a question. If he got it wrong, the participant teacher would give the Confederate learner a shock. And the result was that about 67% of the participant teachers ended up giving shocks, which were really immoral. Learned helplessness is you having control ripped out of your hand, know that you don't have control, which causes you to not be able to form coping strategies. You learn that you don't have control, so you're not able to form coping strategies. Proactive coping is looking at the situation in the future, stressful situation, identifying ways to cope with it beforehand, how to manage it. Mean-focused coping is finding meaning from a traumatic experience as a way to cope with stress. Suspensory ligaments form the ciliary body, which creates a humor. Elaboration, likelihood, and model persuasion states that we're more likely our behavior is dependent on central and purple info, so we're more likely to we behave depending on the argument of the persuader as well as the status and the attractiveness of the persuader. Two areas of most glucocorticoid receptors is the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex. Or frontal cortex. Ashline conformity study was Solomon Ash gave a study to several participants, one participant and a bunch of Confederate participants, like 12, asking them which of the three lines is the same as one test line, and what he did was that the first three trials, they answered correctly, but then by the fourth trial, all the Confederate learners answered the obvious wrong question, and he observed what the participant learner ended up doing if they were given to peer pressure, for example. Vitreous chamber is something that contains a vitreous humor, provides pressure to the eyeball, and gives nutrients to the eyeball. A partial report technique showing them a 3x3 matrix. Ask them to repeat one number. There's a good chance they'll be able to repeat it because the image hasn't left their sensory memory yet. Tool play here is called the formal operational stages, where children are able to reason abstract concepts, think about their behavior, and more reasoning takes place. Cool. Alright, did 678 cards today. That's pretty good. I could do chapter 10. Huh, interesting. I have like 15 of them all done. Didn't expect that. Yeah, I don't want to do chapter 6. I could do chapter 7, but it's not a good idea. I can't do any of these. What's the goal today? I mean, I really just wanted to, not really do too much. I could do chapter 6 or chapter 7, but I mean, I just did them yesterday. I really don't want to do them. Chapter 2 was pretty rough to also. Get some for tomorrow. I know chapter 6 is really hard. Generation of new DNA proceeds in both directions. Supercoiling's idea that DNA coils around itself, kind of like a telephone cord. DNA ligase is something that links unfragmented DNA together, such as Okazaki fragments. 503' for DNA and RNA strands. Probe DNA is a DNA with known sequence that's able to bind to any other piece of DNA. 2 classes. So you have pyrimidines, which are pyrimidines, cytosine, uracil, and thymine. Purines, adenine and guanine. Because nucleotides with T containing phosphate groups, they contain 3 phosphate groups, which are all negatively charged, so they repel each other, providing lots of potential energy for the nucleotide. A nucleotide is a sugar molecule, pentose sugar, with a base attached to carbon 1, and at carbon 5. Yeah, carbon 5. We have a bunch of phosphate groups. Parent strand is the template strand that's used for DNA replication. What is the role of single strand? They prevent DNA from snapping together and prevents DNA from getting attacked by enzymes. G to C is stronger because G to C, they have 3 intramolecular bonds, so 3 hydrogen bonds, intermolecular bonds. What does it mean when we say 2 strands of DNA? They basically run in opposite directions. One's 5' 3', and one's 3' to 5'. Helicase will unwind the DNA in front of the DNA polymerase as it moves down. And What's the combined role of DNA Pol delta and DNA epsilon? DNA polymerase delta is used to, I think, Pol delta, Pol epsilon. Delta and epsilon are used as, they're involved in DNA repair, and they are assisted by something called a sliding clamp, which allows it to better interact with the template strand. pCNA protein that forms a sliding clamp, polymerase in a template strand. What is the combined role of DNA beta and epsilon? They're involved in DNA repair, or is it mitochondrial replication? I think mitochondrial replication. Nope, DNA repair. Watson-Crick model of DNA structure says that DNA is a double helix. Phosphate groups on the inside, sugar base facing the inside, hydrogen bonded to each other. Anti-parallel 5'3'. Origin of replication is the site where DNA begins to unwind. Oops, got 1% left. So I'm gonna stop there. Last one, heterochromatin is just really these are dense chromatin, and these are basically chromatins that are wrapped tightly around histones, so aren't DNA pol can't get inside them, so they're not, or RNA pol can't get inside them, so they're not expressed. These are silent genes. All right, see you later.